Wife regrets listening to empowering advice to open their marriage. I'm reaching out for guidance on salvaging the remains of my marriage. To set the scene, I've been blissfully wed to my husband for 5 years, with our relationship spanning 7. For privacy reasons, we'll go by James and Skyler. Our journey began in our sophomore year at community college, where I completed a 2-year degree in office management, while James pursued and completed a 4-year business administration degree via a university that offered remote courses at our college. Fast forward to the present. I'm 26, James is 27, and we had aspirations to start expanding our family later this year, hoping for a mix of 2 boys and 2 girls to fulfill our dream of a big family. Up until recently, our marriage has been a source of joy, and both our families have embraced us with open arms. Now on to where I faltered, Roy. I inadvertently formed what's commonly known as a work-husband bond, albeit with a delivery driver from one of the big 3 delivery companies who frequents our office. For the sake of anonymity, we'll call him Jaden. Jaden, 25 and unattached, has been our regular delivery guy for nearly 2 years. From our first encounter, there was a palpable connection between us. It wasn't necessarily romantic, but there was a spark that couldn't be ignored. I found myself eagerly anticipating his deliveries, always making sure I was available to chat for a bit whenever he dropped by. On one occasion, our usual small talk took a deeper dive when Jaden expressed a desire to ask me a personal question, stressing his hope that it wouldn't offend me or harm our professional rapport. I reassured him, inviting his question. He then admitted to feeling a strong attraction towards me and wondered if the feeling was mutual. His directness took me by surprise, leaving me slightly embarrassed. After a brief moment to compose myself, I confessed that I felt the same. Jaden mentioned he would have pursued me had I not been married. I acknowledged his feelings, and our conversation ended there. He left, and for the following week our interactions were reduced to awkward small talk. This situation left me feeling guilty and concerned that I might have overstepped a boundary. Despite this, life at home with James was as fulfilling as ever. I want to make it clear that James has always been everything I could ask for in a partner, a lover, a friend, and a husband. Nonetheless, I found myself contemplating how I could unjustly maintain my relationship with James while exploring something more with Jaden. This led me down a rabbit hole of research into polyamory and open marriages, a concept I learned is sometimes referred to as being a cake eater. Initially, I found the concept of open relationships rather off-putting and bizarre, so it didn't occupy much of my thoughts. Deep down, I was aware that my husband would never entertain such an idea. Moreover, even if he were open to it, it could potentially harm our marriage and alienate us from our families, a consequence I desperately wanted to avoid. As time passed, my marriage continued to thrive, yet the idea of forging a deeper bond with Jaden lingered in my mind. Curiosity got the better of me, and I revisited my research, stumbling upon an intriguing blog post titled, "It Doesn't Hurt to Ask." The author shared her journey within a happily open marriage, detailing her love for her husband, alongside her desire for a relationship with another man she met during volunteer work. She expressed her initial trepidation about broaching the topic with her husband, fearing it might ruin their marriage. After harboring these feelings for over 2 years, a spontaneous conversation during a long drive led her to raise the question. To her astonishment, her husband was receptive. They ventured into an open marriage and have since been seeing other partners a few times each month, claiming this arrangement has fortified their marriage and increased their happiness. Her story resonated with me, mirroring my own desires but also my fears of discussing it with my husband. One lazy Sunday morning, as we were relaxing and browsing the web, I seized the opportunity to mention open marriages, inquiring about his stance on them. His response, after clarifying that I was referring to couples engaging in relationships outside their marriage, was one of strong disapproval, equating the desire for such arrangements with a preference for divorce over fidelity. His evident disgust prompted me to swiftly change the topic, vowing internally to never revisit it, prioritizing the preservation of our wonderful marriage. A few weeks later, in a moment of post-intimacy bliss, James unexpectedly revisited the topic, inquiring who I had in mind when I mentioned open marriages. His question caught me off guard, igniting a sense of dread within me. As I faced him, seeking clarification, he revealed his suspicion, informed by research, that women who suggest open relationships might either be unfaithful or contemplating it. His insight deeply unsettled me, visibly affecting me. Sensing my turmoil, James pressed for honesty, prompting me to assert my fidelity, stressing that I had never and would never betray him. I could have simply left the conversation as it was, but I chose to go further. I confessed that, should we ever entertain the idea of an open marriage, there was someone at work whom I might be interested in. Prompted by James to elaborate, I shared details about Jaden and our interactions, including his admission of feelings towards me. Though I omitted mentioning that I had reciprocated those feelings, James's response took me by surprise. He suggested that, in a way, I had already been unfaithful. His assertion sparked my defiance as I argued against it, but he clarified, "What you've described with Jaden amounts to what's known as an emotional affair." This was a new term for me, and as James proposed we table the discussion for the night due to his early start the next day, I found myself restless and unable to sleep. Compelled by curiosity and concern, I turned to my phone for information on emotional affairs, immersing myself in various articles and testimonials. The evidence was undeniable. My relationship with Jaden constituted an emotional affair. This realization made me feel deeply guilty, as if I had truly betrayed James. Tormented by these thoughts, I spent the early hours of the morning on the couch, eventually falling asleep only to be awakened by James's departure for work. Our exchange of goodbyes this morning felt heavier, burdened by my newfound guilt over my emotional involvement with Jaden. Days later, in another intimate moment, James unexpectedly proposed the idea of experimenting with an open marriage, citing our previous discussions and suggesting we explore this while we are still young if it indeed interested us. His proposition left me astonished. I questioned his timing, and he shared his contemplation on our conversations, hinting at a willingness to try if it truly was something I desired. I acknowledged the idea with interest, but emphasized that nothing should endanger our marriage or the love we share, as he remained my utmost priority. James then remarked, "If our love is genuinely strong, it should survive any infidelity." I argued that in the context of a consensual open relationship, it wouldn't be infidelity, since it would be a mutual agreement. Without dwelling on that point, he simply declared, "Consider our marriage open as of this moment." His rush into this new arrangement startled me, and I urged caution, suggesting we first need to lay down some clear boundaries. He outlined 3 basic rules for our open relationship. First, we had to give advance notice of who we intended to be with and when. Second, we were to share details about the encounter afterwards, albeit without delving into explicit content. And third, the use of protection was mandatory in all intimate encounters, without any exceptions. I accepted his conditions, but suggested adding 2 more. 1, that we keep our open marriage private, and 2, that we commit to ensuring these outside relationships wouldn't jeopardize our union, aiming to stay together regardless. James, however, expressed his inability to consent to these additional terms. Upon my inquiry, he remained adamant, refusing to discuss or agree to my propositions, a reaction that was quite unlike him. Despite feeling uneasy about James's uncharacteristic response, I snuggled close to him and we drifted off to sleep together. This exchange left me with a lingering sense of discomfort about embarking on an open relationship, suspecting James might have an underlying motive. Consequently, I refrained from exploring the open relationship further for a month, maintaining our usual lifestyle. During this period, I kept my interactions with Jaden, a colleague, to a minimum, engaging only in brief mundane conversations about trivial matters. But when Jaden expressed missing our deeper talks and inquired about my sudden quietness, I attributed it to being swamped with work both at the office and home, though internally I contemplated disclosing my open marriage situation. Eventually, I chose to share this with him, a decision I now regret wishing I could reverse. Considering it inappropriate for workplace discussion, I invited him for drinks after work, where I shared my open marriage status and inquired about his interest in pursuing a relationship with me. Without hesitation, Jaden agreed, revealing his long-standing anticipation and respectful patience, alongside dreams he had about me. Our conversation that evening was laden with flirtation. We decided to have our first intimate meeting the next day at his apartment after work, but I made it clear I had to leave by 6:30 p.m. to be home with James, who was still my top priority. Upon returning home, I prepared a special dinner for James and afterward briefed him about my encounter with Jaden, including our plans for the next day, ensuring James was still on board with our open marriage arrangement. His surprised reaction was evident, but after confirming, I reassured him that his feelings were paramount to me. and we could still retract our decision. He consented to proceed, but the hug we shared felt awkward and distant, a stark contrast to our usual warmth, likely due to my nervousness. We spent the rest of the evening engaged in our respective work, speaking little. As we settled into bed, I curled up beside him, attempting to spark a romantic moment, but he gently declined, citing exhaustion and the need for sleep. The following morning, I awoke to find James already gone, with a text left behind explaining his early departure for a previously unmentioned meeting, promising to see me later. This departure from his usual behavior raised an eyebrow, but I brushed it aside and proceeded to dress up for the day, picking an outfit with the anticipation of meeting Jaden after work. Despite my attempts to reach James via text throughout the day and receiving no reply, I contemplated calling off my rendezvous with Jaden. I almost wish I had, especially when a message from James arrived at 4:17 p.m., expressing his love and confirming our evening plans, which reassured me to proceed with the plans with Jaden. Our encounter was passionately charged, satisfying on a physical level, yet lacking the depth and love I share with James. After leaving Jaden's place around 6:40 p.m. and arriving home to an empty house, I utilized the solitude to wash away any trace of the afternoon's affair. Despite the physical satisfaction, I was engulfed by feelings of guilt and shame. In an attempt to alleviate these feelings, I prepared a special dinner for James, lighting candles to foster a romantic ambiance, aiming to demonstrate my unwavering love for him and to signify that my physical involvement with Jaden held no emotional weight. I had hoped to reconnect with James intimately that evening, fully aware of the potential judgments regarding my actions, but comforted by the fact that I had taken all necessary precautions with Jaden. However, James's continued absence and unresponsiveness to my calls and texts deepened my worry. Finally, at 9:30 p.m., a brief message from him advised not to wait up. His silence to my inquiries about his whereabouts left me restless, and I eventually succumbed to sleep, only to be awakened later by the sound of the shower running in the spare bathroom. This unusual behavior from James, including the locked door and lack of response, was unsettling. When he finally appeared, his casual greeting was quickly followed by a blunt inquiry about my time with Jaden. While I preferred a different terminology, I confirmed the encounter and sought to understand his own whereabouts. He explained that his night was spent hopping between bars and dancing. When I detected the scent of perfume on his clothes and inquired about his companion, he defensively mentioned that the details were unnecessary since they hadn't been intimate. His use of coarse language, uncharacteristic in our conversations, heightened my anxiety. Further questioning led to his decision to use the guest facilities, asserting he would continue to do so until I underwent 2 STD screenings. His insistence was a shock to me. I protested, citing our precautions with Jaden, but he countered with concerns about oral HPV and herpes, declaring a personal form of social distancing until I proved clean. Distraught, I pleaded for us to reconsider our open marriage arrangement, to which he coldly responded that it was his turn to explore, leaving me in tears as he dismissed himself to sleep, citing another early commitment. The night was long and tearful for me, ending on the couch. By morning he was gone again, with a brief message advising not to wait for him. Attempts to reach him throughout the day were futile, leaving me in a state of despair, fearing the worst for our marriage. Without any interaction with Jaden at work, I reached out to him by the day's end, seeking closure on our brief affair, expressing my regret and desire to focus solely on my marriage. Jaden agreed to meet, during which I ended our liaison, acknowledging my mistake. He requested one final encounter, which was brief and lacked connection, leading him to critique the lack of enthusiasm. My apology for the misstep and acknowledgement of my error did little to ease the tension. As I departed, his parting words left me more confused and hurt, driving home in tears. How could I have made such a colossal mistake? I feel like I've wrecked my marriage over absolutely nothing. In those moments, I considered myself perhaps the most foolish person alive, overwhelmed again by a sense of guilt. James didn't return until 1 a.m. that night, and the realization hit me hard that I might have irrevocably damaged my life. The following day, James left early again, leaving a message advising me not to wait up for him. The growing distance and his aloofness felt like a heavy weight on my heart. I missed our morning routines, our evenings together, and the simple joys of our daily life. I reached out to James, longing for a conversation, to which he agreed with the condition it happens early as he had plans for the day. When I queried about his plans, he left my question unanswered. He came home late again, and without exchanging words, I lay in bed, engulfed in tears as he showered and went to bed. Eager for a resolution, I woke up early to catch him in the morning. His entrance and actions were devoid of warmth, a stark contrast to our usual interactions. In a desperate attempt for connection, I confronted him, insisting on eye contact and expressing my love and regret for the decisions I had made. His silence and the look of disbelief in his eyes were heartbreaking. When pressed for his feelings, his uncertainty cut deeper. My pleas for reconciliation were met with skepticism, and in a moment of frustration, I accused him of orchestrating this outcome, which he denied, attributing the decline of our marriage to my suggestion of an open relationship. His refusal to enforce fidelity on me, stating it's a choice, left me feeling even more hopeless. His plans to leave and his decision not to join me for Easter Sunday with my family, who adores him, was another blow. His indifference to what I would tell my family and his cold departure left me feeling utterly lost and broken. In this moment of despair, I'm reaching out for advice and experiences from anyone who has navigated through the complexities of open marriages or has managed to rebuild their relationship after such trials. Your insights and stories of reconciliation would be invaluable to me. Thank you for lending your ear to my story. Now, I find myself seeking solace in bed, overwhelmed by sorrow. Update 1. I wanted to share an update with everyone. Firstly, my heartfelt thanks go out to all of you who offered support and feedback. It truly made a difference during these challenging days. I received some harsh criticism and was called names by many, which I accept and appreciate as part of your honest feedback. The past few days, including Easter Sunday, have been incredibly tough, marking some of the lowest points in my life. Upon arriving at my parents', their immediate question about James's whereabouts forced me to fabricate an emergency work commitment to avoid casting a shadow over our family event. Despite my efforts to maintain this story, my family grew skeptical due to my lack of communication with James, something that is usually constant. In an attempt to cover this up, I sent fake messages and pretended to receive responses, claiming he was still tied up with work. Regrettably, there was complete silence from James's end, not even a message to check if I had arrived safely, which deeply saddened me. I had planned to confide in my parents about our marital strife the following day, anticipating their intense disappointment and disapproval. My fears were realized when I shared the truth. Their reaction was as harsh as I had anticipated, with my sister joining in the reprimand. Amidst tears, I expressed my remorse, acknowledging my grave mistake and vowing never to repeat such actions. My commitment to mend things with James remains my priority. Despite their anger, my family assured me of their love and hopes for our marriage's recovery. Returning home on Monday, my attempts to reach James were met with silence. A note he left informed me of his trip to Florida to visit his parents, a visit we had initially planned together for early May, now derailed by my actions. This realization only deepens my self-reproach. Currently, I'm engulfed in sadness and a profound sense of depression. Strikingly, I find myself beyond tears as the pain and guilt have burrowed so deeply within me that crying seems futile. Update 2. Nearly a year has passed since my last update, and while I hadn't intended to post again, the significant interest from the community prompted me to share what's been happening in my life. Regrettably, I must begin with the difficult news. James and I are divorced, a decision finalized in December. Ultimately, James felt unable to continue our marriage due to my involvement with another person, stating that it destroyed his trust and left him feeling humiliated. He believes that divorcing restored his sense of manhood, a notion I dispute, as his masculinity was never diminished by our situation, which remains private, except among our families. On a brighter note, and indeed it's wonderful news, James and I have rekindled our relationship in a new form since last Valentine's Day. Our encounters, limited to once a week at his discretion, have reignited a passion far surpassing the intensity of our early days together. However, James has made it expressly clear that our relationship will remain strictly physical, with no future prospects of marriage, cohabitation, or formal partnership. Although this arrangement is far from my ideal, I'm willing to accept it for the chance to be close to James again. My ultimate hope is to win him back fully, or, failing that, to start a family with him. While the idea of intentionally trapping him with a pregnancy is abhorrent to me, I do dream of bearing his children, and envision a co-parenting arrangement that could work independently of marriage. I recognize the potential complications this could introduce to any future relationships, but my heart is set on James and no one else. This update might be my last unless significant changes occur, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts on my current situation. Am I irrational for continuing to date James under these circumstances? Would it be wiser to seek a new partner with whom to build a life and family? Please know that Jaden is entirely out of the picture, representing nothing more than a regrettable lapse in judgment on my part. I look forward to your feedback, and thank you for taking the time to follow my story.